I first heard about it from Carrie Stearns in the summer of, I guess it would have been the early summer of '83. I was living with a family of women, the Grady's, and Carrie came to the house. She was friends with them already, and she was already involved. I'd been away for a year and had just moved back. I joined a women's affinity group here in Ithaca, and let's see, the timing, I can't remember, but yeah, I went the first summer for sure. Yeah, I felt kind of shy. I remember sticking to the front of the property, but I was impressed by the whole cooking setup, and I thought that was really cool. I never slept there. I remember doing some kind of workshop, I think it was a Joanna Macy Despair and Empowerment workshop up in the barn with maybe, 15 or 20 women. So I would say I was actually there at the front maybe 15 times total. One kind of interesting story was I had gone to Catholic school here in Ithaca, and the nuns that we had were out of Rochester, and I saw my 8th grade teacher, who was a nun from Rochester, and she was there with other nuns and apprentice nuns, whatever that's called, and they were doing a little walk from the camp down to the main gate, and I was like, oh my God, Sister Kathleen, this is great. So I joined them and went on the walk down there with them. And then when we got to the main gate, they had a service, a communion service. And I remember one of the, whatever they're called, novitiates or apprentice nuns, saying, well, we can't have communion because we don't have a priest here. And Sister Kathleen said, look, we're going to have Holy Communion, and if Jesus wants to be there, that's his business. Which to me was great. I think there was at least 3 affinity groups from the Ithaca area that were focused on Seneca Army Depot. I could be wrong, because I then also got later involved with Griffiths Air Force Base, and there were affinity groups around that as well. But I believe there was 3 affinity groups. There was a women's affinity group, parents affinity group, and then a mixed gender affinity group. And we, the biggest thing I remember is that we met and made these masks out of, it's not exactly paper mache, but they're made, it becomes your face. And so we made those in pairs in someone's living room, and then we decorated them, and then we took them to the fence and left them there as a symbol of that people are watching what's going on here. Yeah, I was a student at Cornell, and I met this family that I later was living with, named the Grady's, and we went to the Pentagon in 1980 through Jonah House, which is a House of Faith and Resistance in Baltimore, who organized a year-long presence at the Pentagon. So we had a group from Ithaca that plugged into that, and we went down in July of that year, and then we went back. Yeah, so I had been involved with stuff around that. I think the first time I was arrested was at Seneca. There was a time when we went to all the gates, is that right? I mean, do you guys remember that? So, I mean, I feel, unless I'm mixing it up with Griffiths, that I feel like there was a time when we went to all the gates, and, well, I remember vividly that we were at the gate farther away, closer to Seneca Lake, and that there was like a bit of a walk, and I remember this woman came out of her house with the American flag, and she was very angry, and she had this, point on her American flag, and it was almost like she was waving at us, like she was threatening us with the American flag, which is pretty interesting symbolism. And we went up over the fence, and we had put carpets over the top because there was razor wire, and we were helping each other up over the fence. And I must have been with the Women's Affinity group. I feel like that was maybe either later in the summer or maybe in the fall of that year. Maybe not. And then I was arrested a second time. So the first time I just got a ban and bar letter. And then the second time, it was just 3 of us. And I don't remember the other women's names, but what we did was we went kind of on an obscure dirt road. I was sort of interested in the whole thing with the railroad tracks because I had been interested in the writings of Jim and Shelley Douglas in Washington State, and they were tracking the route of the nuclear weapons from Amarillo, Texas, to where they lived in Washington, and saying that this train is going through the United States with nuclear weapons on it, and people weren't aware of it, and they had this whole thing where people would try to watch and alert. And so I was aware of that, and I was interested in the fact that there are tracks at Seneca. And I mean, as far as we knew, they were flying the weapons in and out, but we weren't sure because they never really would say. So I wanted to go in there and sit on the tracks. So that's what we did. We walked in, we went over the fence in an obscure place where there was nobody around. It was easy. In fact, we might have gone under the fence. And then we walked for about a mile, the 3 of us. And then we got to where the tracks were, and we sat down on them. And I kind of remember we were a little bit out in the open, like, so they finally did see us, and they came and arrested us. And because it was so the first time we went to court, we went to court, but they gave us a ban and bar. So the second time, to my surprise, we were given, we were facing jail time, which I actually, when I did the action, didn't think that would have been the case. So I prepared a defense. I think the other 2 women, God, I don't remember, but they weren't at trial with me, I don't think. I think I was by myself, and I prepared this defense and presented it in Rochester, and was found guilty and was sentenced to 60 days in jail, which I served. The first 10, I was a federal prisoner, but they put me in county jails. So the first 10 days I was in Monroe County Jail in Rochester, and then they transferred me to Oswego, and I ended up serving 50 days total out of 60. And that would have been the fall of '84, I guess, winter, I don't know. I could look it up. It was transformative. It was what was the final kind of thing of radicalizing me, really. I mean, and it changed my life. My family wasn't necessarily conservative. In fact, my mother's a liberal Democrat, but they're mainstream middle class, I would say, white Americans. So, and you know, she was kind of didn't know quite what to make of the fact that I was getting arrested. In fact, she told me she went to a Christmas party, and this was a few years later after I'd been arrested at Griffiths Air Force Base, and she met someone at the party who was like, "Oh, I was arrested with your daughter." And that's not her world. She didn't really know what to make of it. I think it was a part of the whole fact of me getting involved through people that I was meeting, and obviously, as I said, I also got involved with Griffiths Air Force Base stuff, but it became like, because of Seneca, I knew about Greenham, and I knew there was a peace camp in Holland, and I was just sort of aware of all that stuff. I think meeting the women that I met had an effect on me, just in the sense of opening my eyes to kind of an alternative. As I said, you know, I grew up in this mainstream family, and so just being around women who were choosing different choices was helpful. It was like opening a window. I'm not sure. I didn't step into it maybe as thoroughly as some of the women that were there at the camp, but I think it enabled me to find my own path maybe in a way that I might not have been otherwise. I think people thought it was too radical. I think there was some kind of, I don't know if the word stigma or something, because it was thought that everyone there was a lesbian. I certainly remember when there was that walk where people got stopped in Waterloo, and Barbara Deming was there, right? And I remember what stands out more to me was the anger that it seemed to arouse in people. Like I said, that woman with the flag, and in Waterloo it was sort of the same thing. I mean, they had a permit to do this walk, and yet the courts or whoever allowed the angry townspeople to stop them in their tracks and get arrested when they had a permit. And so that is sort of what I remember about, but it didn't have an effect on me, but I remember that was sort of at the edges of it. And but I also remember hearing about that time when the people were arrested and in that gym for, I think, 2 or 3 days, and that actually was an amazing thing, because all these activists who were busy and moving around and got to be together. And that I remember hearing that Barbara Deming kind of calmed the atmosphere down and was interacting with the guards in a way that was respectful and treating them with dignity, and that kind of helped the atmosphere. And that it was like all these women got to be together and kind of learn from each other and develop this solidarity and even have fun, is what I remember. And no, I mean, at the Pentagon, since 9/11, I have not been there, but I've heard from Claire Grady, she was just there last week, that it is like beyond intense. But even when I was there in the mid-'80s, it was pretty creepy. And the guards were already kind of on alert, like thinking we were going to be violent and ready for that. It wasn't like at Seneca and Griffiths, you could try to make human contact with the person that was arresting you, and that usually worked. You could feel they were nervous, but if you kind of conveyed that you cared about them or told them your name or whatever, they often would relax. But at the Pentagon, it just wasn't like that. They were having none of that, and this was in the 80s. Probably did nonviolence training to go to the Pentagon, and I probably did a nonviolence training to go to Seneca, and then I later became a trainer, and yeah, I've been to so many nonviolence trainings. I'm totally sick of them, but I've gone on to support people that have been arrested. So there was the Griffiths Plowshares, where Claire was part of that. And Carrie and I were support people for that action and went to that trial. And then it just went out of my head. Well, yeah, I was supportive of Annie Majors. But there was something, the St. Patrick's 4. So people that went to a recruiting station right here near Ithaca, the day, March 17th, just before the war started in Iraq in 2003, and knelt and prayed and poured their own blood, and so they were arrested for that. So I was one of the main support people for that, which went on for a long time because they had 2 trials. So they had a trial here in Tompkins County where they had a hung jury, or they were acquitted. I can't even remember. I think they had a hung jury. Yeah, that's it. They had a hung jury, which sort of meant that they couldn't be put in jail. But then the prosecutor, or the district attorney here, bumped it up to the federal level and gave them federal charges. So then they had to go to court. They had to go to trial all over again in Binghamton. And I was one of the main supporters. I mean, there were many, but I was one of the people that was involved with supporting that action. I stayed focused on peace and disarmament issues for a long time, and since '83 have been a war tax resistor, which has been an important part of my identity, I guess you could say, or important part of my activism. and at one point had a job as the national coordinator for the National Vortex Resistance Movement. I did that for 4 years here in Ithaca, but in the past few years my focus has changed slightly to economic justice and issues of class. So I'm currently involved with the Tompkins County Workers Center, which was the Living Wage Coalition, and interested in class issues, and went and actually got a job at Walmart to see what it was like for people, and then did that for twice, and then most recently went and worked at the Ramada Inn as a housekeeper, and to see what that was like, which was unbelievably hard. And I mean, that was, going to jail was my first eye-opener all those years ago. This has been my second eye-opener. The lives of the working poor, and so I'm pretty involved with that right now. We have a hotel workers campaign and are trying to figure out how, on all different fronts, to organize low-wage workers and organize for better wages. So I haven't been involved in going to the Pentagon and or stuff like that on a getting arrested level. I don't know if I'm feeling more kind of hopeless as I get older or what, but I truly value civil disobedience, and I understand its place in history as it has been so far, but I guess I just don't feel drawn to doing it anymore. It just seems like, is that all there is? You know, on one hand, I feel like we should all be in the streets. Like, if we were all in the streets, we would stop this war. And I feel so anguished about it that I can't even really read the papers. I can't even really read about, on a day-to-day basis, about what's going on in Iraq. But I just don't know what we can do. And I see, you know, my friends that have gotten arrested, and not just the St. Patrick's 4, but, you know, we had demonstrations here in the streets. There was a moment where the police all sort of came around, and then they said you have to stay to the sidewalk, and one person stepped out, and then basically a bunch of people stepped out, but it was only 26 out of a few hundred, you know, and I don't know, I don't know what there is to do. And I guess I feel like if you can meet people where they're at, and work with where they're at, and bringing them into the movement, and where people are at, a lot of people are, you know, they don't even really make enough money to feed their families, or they're struggling to feed their families, and they don't have time to go to meetings about the war. So that's one of my thoughts. It's very conflicted, and it's not fully fleshed out, but I think that Catholic school and my family taught me that everyone on this planet is our brother and our sister, and that, as I said, my mom is a liberal Democrat, so there's this strand of Catholicism that does look out for the poor, you know, preferential option for the poor, liberation theology. So, I mean, I didn't have that when I was younger, but but I had this feeling that, yes, we have to look out for each other. And then once I met the Grady's and got exposed to liberation theology, that was sort of, that's what made sense to me, and the Catholic worker movement. And so I'm part of the Catholic worker here in Ithaca, and that I feel like that's my community. And for people who don't know, I mean, the Catholic worker is not associated with the Catholic Church, so it's quite kind of anarchistic and even eclectic, you could say, and people aren't necessarily Catholic who are in the Catholic worker, and but it is doing action for a better world coming out of a faith. And I don't consider myself a Catholic anymore. I don't go to Mass, but I can still resonate with the justice tradition of the Catholic Church. I resonate with the justice tradition of any faith, and Yeah, so I feel like any person that I meet who has a faith tradition, I can meet them on that level. In fact, someone that I was working with at the Ramada, is a Christian, and that's important to him, and I felt like we could meet there, even though right now for me it's not the same language, but I can see that we have that in common. I guess I remembered that this other kind of story about when I was in jail, which was pretty important to me, was I had been reading, I guess it was Barbara Deming, in jail in Rochester, and I remember reading getting this concept that like they can put you in jail, your body, but not your spirit. Like you can still be free, and that really spoke to me. And so after 10 days in Rochester, they moved me to the Oswego County Jail, which was completely different. Rochester was urban, this was so rural, and it was this old-fashioned jail, and it was mostly men, but the women were on the third floor, and it had sloping roofs. They gave us slippers. It was in Rochester. They had opened our cell doors with a button on a panel somewhere down the hall. This was literally a key. It felt like I was in a Western movie. It was weird. And they called the women guards matrons, and there were just a few of us. There was literally like 5 or 6, and mostly it was white rural women who were in for bad checks or whatever. But when they first moved me there, I was used to the way it had been in Rochester, even though I'd only been there for 10 days. And so they had different rules here at this jail, and they told me, for example, they had the light on all night, which they hadn't done in Rochester, and so I couldn't sleep very well, so I put the blanket over my head, and they came along and said, you have to take that blanket off your head, we have to be able to see your face, and this pissed me off. And then someone sent me a card, and I took toothpaste and I pasted it up to the wall, didn't have any tape, but what I had learned, would work. You have to take that card down. And I was like, this is when this reading from Barbara Deming kicked in, and I was like, I'm thinking they can't tell me what to do, They have my body, but they don't have to have my cooperation. And so I was like, no, I'm not going to take that down. This was face to face to a guard through the bars, and the guard was totally didn't know what to do, and went downstairs. Someone else comes up, this was a guy, a man, and you need to take that card down. And I'm like, no, I don't. And again, he didn't know what to do, so he goes downstairs, and then there's this loudspeaker outside my cell on the wall, and a few minutes later this voice comes out of the loudspeaker saying, Ms. Loehr, yes, take that card down. And I'm like, no. It was just ridiculous. So it was Friday afternoon, the warden was gone, and they didn't know what to do with me. And so for the weekend, it was like this standoff. And then Monday morning came, and they dragged me out of my cell. Well, I was used to being dragged places. I'd been arrested at Seneca, and it's like, well, whatever. They dragged me out of my cell. I guess they couldn't themselves take it down. I don't know. But they just took me to another cell. That was their way of resolving it. But I think I did get that, that we have this strength that maybe I hadn't really been aware of before or tapped into before, this deep personal strength that you can have, that you can tap into. A lot of my siblings, I have 7 siblings, a lot of them are very supportive of what I do, and that makes a lot of difference. I think my parents still don't. My mom sort of gets it, but I think it's a threat to her, the choices that she's made in her life, so it's hard for her to embrace it. But I think she does appreciate it and on a certain level, and accepts me as I am on a certain level, but it's not full-fledged, because that's not what the choices she's made, so we can't sit down and have long conversations about it. But she's tried as best as she could. She went and worked, when they lived in Texas, she worked for a parish, which was a pretty liberal brand of Catholicism. So those people actually understood. Like her boss, a priest, used to refer to me as Mary the Felon. How's Mary the Felon? And I would come to visit and they'd be like, oh, it's this one, this, we like her, and my mom, she got all that. She knows about liberation theology and stuff like that. So she appreciates it, I guess. I don't think people are going to change until they're forced to. So I guess my best case scenario would be that peak oil hits and that people are totally, like our whole lives are turned upside down in terms of what we're used to doing and food that we're used to getting and cars driving, and that out of that will come this cooperation and looking out for each other and much more growing of food everywhere, because it'll have to be local. And yeah, it's not a whole lot more fleshed out than that, but that's one vision. We have a farm. We rent land from people that have land that they want to rent. So the first year it was 3 women, and we called ourselves 3 sisters. The second year we had a 4th woman join us, but we still call ourselves 3 sisters. And we're a community-supported agriculture farm, which means that households and families or whoever will sign up in the spring with us and pay us money, and then we will grow food for them. And then in our case, they come to the farm once a week and pick up the food. So, and we also have flowers, which is wonderful, and people love, and we love. And so yeah, we all work part-time because organic agriculture in our society is not subsidized like conventional agriculture is. So it's hard to make a living, and we're deliberately small, more out of personal preference. It is also kind of political thing of not using fossil fuels, but it's even more so just that's our preference. We prefer, we don't want to necessarily drive tractors, and we like it small. We like working with our own hands and bodies, and so it's not we don't have like 150 households that come and pick up. It's just this year we'll have 30 shares, and that'll be the most that we've done. But it's great. It's really great when people come to the barn and get their food, and like little kids are excited, and the people are talking to each other, and like the kids will start eating right away. Mom, can I eat this carrot? And it's just a really good feeling to grow food for people. That group, the Tasteful Ladies for Peace, it always rubbed me the wrong way, and maybe I knew one of the women in it. I didn't sort of get it, and then but it's vaguely rubbed me the wrong way. It felt like it was a put down of the peace camp, I think. That was my sense of it. Like, the peace camp wasn't tasteful, and we are. And maybe it was such a total joke that I didn't get it, but that could be, yeah. And now that I'm like more tuned into class issues, I kind of even take more offense at it, but yeah. And I was sad because I forget who it was that just told me that the peace camp got sold for back taxes, and that's just, to me, that's just, I just wish that that could have been prevented. And I know obviously you guys are all about the history of it, and I just think that if people had known, we could have rallied and raised enough money just to pay the taxes. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was time, but it would have been nice to have had a number of people, whoever wanted to be in on that decision, be allowed to be in on that decision. And then if it was decided that no one had the energy to live there and had the energy to put into it, okay, then it's a decision. But to have it be just that it happened with none of us really knowing and getting that to me that's sad. And a friend of mine actually was driving by like 2 weeks ago, and he said there was stuff out on the road, and I'm not sure if he stopped and got it. The message was there's stuff out there that should be saved for historical purposes. That is a piece of history, Herstory, that should be preserved, and that it can transform into a different vision if that's what people would choose. I remember when I was at Cornell, it was 1980, 81, and 82, and I was part of this group called the Disarmament Breakfast, and we would meet every Thursday morning at 7:30 and have pancakes and talk about disarmament issues. And they showed this movie, I don't know the name of it. I think it was, what stuck with me was that it was like, we're at this turning point around the nuclear arms race, and we can stop it. And that really stuck with me. And like my thought was like, well, how did it turn out? You know, like, or how will it turn out? And we actually can do something or not do something. And you know, maybe there's just as many nuclear weapons in the world as there was 25 years ago, but certainly the fear and the hype around that has gone way down since that time. And so in some ways I feel like we did have an impact on that situation. And I don't know where the clock is, how many minutes to midnight. It's probably 6, which is not, as you know, still not that great, but at least it's not 1 or 2. Well, first of all, you know, they closed the depot. So, and that was a moment that went by. I remember thinking at the time that we needed to have a big party, because, you know, even after the peace camp wasn't active, there were still people here in Ithaca that were still going up to the depot, and so there was still this focus on it. And our one big thing of ours was conversion, you know, like economic conversion. Like, let's have jobs that aren't building bombs. Let's have jobs that pay people but do other things. And we would write leaflets about that. And so, like, it was a big focus for many years, and other people that we knew were still getting arrested there and stuff. And then it closed, and we didn't do anything. We didn't have this big party, and I guess it's still, I regret that we didn't. We should have had a huge party, even if it was, you know, just 20 of us that came. It still would have been this kind of ritual or something. So I guess that is a piece of it, you know. And then Griffiths, I think that's like way downsized as far as I know, and so that might just be what do you call it, like circumstantial, like there's other bases still out there. And I did go to the School of the Americas in Georgia for many years, and the people that I'm with still go there. So I'm not really sure, I can't say why or how it came about. Sometimes I fear that I just sort of, well, it's sort of a fear, but that I just sort of go along with whoever I'm friends with. But I actually think that could be like a double-edged sword. Like, I think that's actually true of most people. And so I think that's like a clue as to how activists can get other people involved, is like one-on-one contact. You know, like, people generally aren't going to come to an event by seeing a flyer. They're going to come because they know a friend and they trust that person, and they're going to get involved in whatever the issue is. And so sometimes I wonder if, you know, now I'm involved in economic justice because, I live with the person that does that. And anyway, I'm telling my secrets here, but of course, as an activist, I think about strategy all the time, and I think about, like, how do people change? How do people change? Why do people get involved? Some people get involved in this issue and not that issue, or get involved at all. And, like, what is it? And how did I get involved? It was people. It was my friends. And then I try to think more deeply. And why is it that I was friends with them? You know, like, what kind of privileges? I mean, that's what I think about a lot now, is privilege. Like, I'm just, like, so loaded with privilege in this society. And then I try to think about people that aren't, and what their lives are like, and what what choices they're making, and it just sort of swirls around. But when I was involved with the war tax resistance group and I was the main person, it was mostly a desk job. But at that time, I really saw how much difference one person could make in an organization. And that's a lesson that I've really kept as I've gone into other organizations. And I'm not sure why I'm saying that, except that I think that a lot of people don't feel they can make a difference, don't feel empowered. And I know that probably I got that lesson because my mom was in politics and she worked for a congressman, and I'm not really choosing that exact path, but I think that I was told through society, because we had a certain amount of money, I went to college, that I could make a difference, and how to figure out how to bring in more and more people.